Hi, and thanks for listening to From Where I Sit. A quick announcement before we start. I'm excited to share that season 2 of the podcast is out now. Tune in to hear a fresh slate of conversations with the experts leading and shaping the built economy. Welcome to From Where I Sit, the podcast where we explore the forces shaping America's built economy. I'm your host, Tom McGee, President and CEO of ICSC. In discussion with prominent leaders and innovators, we cut through the noise to explore the trends and innovations influencing the future of our communities. Welcome to this episode of From Where I Sit. Today's guest is one of the most dynamic entrepreneurial leaders in commercial real estate, private equity, and sports business. David Adelman is the CEO of Campus Apartment, where he's revolutionized student housing and urban development nationwide. Beyond real estate, David is founder of Darko Capital, his family office, and co-founder and vice chairman of Future Standard Investments, which has approximately $80 billion in assets under management, specializing in alternatives and private assets. His influence also extends to major sports and entertainment ventures as a partner in Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment and chairing the ambitious new 76ers Arena project. David's journey from investing his bar mitzvah savings as a teen to building billion-dollar enterprises is a testament to vision, ingenuity, and relentless drive. David, welcome to From Where I Sit.
Thank you, Tom. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So I want to get to you investing your bar mitzvah money, but I know there's an event before that even. Basketball game, 11 years old. Talk about how playing your quote uncle and how that led on your journey to begin what is a marvelous career.
Yeah. So to sum it up, my real estate career started because I had a gambling problem. I'm 11 years old. Everyone has that aunt or uncle growing up that's not really your family member, but closer than family. And I've been fortunate to have a guy named Alan Horowitz who, growing up, I called my uncle, but as close to me as a father you could be. And he was a really successful and visionary guy who created Campus Apartments with his mother in the late 1950s. He was a real visionary in, just saying that student housing could be more than just a mom and pop business. And so I'm 11 years old, hanging out with Uncle Alan. I said, "Do you want to go outside in the driveway and play basketball?" And he said, "Sure." And, he's a really unique guy at 83 years old, still very competitive. But, I said something as a kid, like, "I'll bet you I can win." And he said, "Oh, let's bet." And, most people let the 11-year-old kid win. Not this guy. He was going to teach me a lesson. And so essentially I said, "I'll bet you." He said, "Well, what do you want to bet?" I was like, I didn't. He said, "Do you have a baseball glove?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "If I win, I keep your baseball glove." So I lost my baseball glove, my football, my basketball that we were playing with. And then when you're a kid, you have like a little passbook, bank book account. Kids they don't know what that is, but
like like your savings account.
Yeah, your savings account.
Yeah.
And so I lost all of those things.
Well, you must have played multiple games and you kept doubling down on the.
I did. I was chasing. I had the gambler addiction, I guess, and I lost it all. And so I'm sitting here today at the corner of 41st and Walnut in Philadelphia, and I came here as an 11-year-old kid once a week. I had to stack lumber and sweep sawdust, and each week he'd hand me back one of my things. And I remember thinking, why would anyone do real estate? This sucks. So I was working pretty hard. Ultimately paid off my debts. So the story goes, you asked me about the bar mitzvah, the $2,000. 2 years later, I had a bar mitzvah. I had about $2,000 of gift money from family and friends. And my parents thought I should put it in the stock market with my grandfather, who was a stockbroker. And I said, "No, I want to give it to Uncle Alan, and I'd like to do what he does." They were like, "What? Real estate?" I was like, "Yeah." And so I handed Uncle Alan the money. He said, "Well, which building do you want to invest in?" So we got in his car, drove around what is University City in Philadelphia. And after a few minutes, I said, "That one." We got out of the car and he said, "Well, why this one?" I said, "Because it's the biggest one." I didn't know how to value real estate as a 13-year-old kid.
Your site selection process has matured since then, but
a little bit. I don't just use the force now. Yeah. So, I go there and I walk the steps and I'm like realizing that my money could probably only pay for the stair tread. But that's what I did. And it became a great lesson. To this day, Alan is an amazing teacher and just taught me the ins and outs of the business as a kid. made sure that I did every job growing up, summers and weekends and things like that, vacations from high school and college. And I was fortunate to really have like a front row seat with a really amazing mentor who taught me the business, who seeded me to get started. And it's been a great run.
So, first of all, 11 years old, that's like 1983 timeframe. You're now, and we'll get to this, but you're having ownership interest in the 76ers. In 1983, they won the championship.
Correct.
That's the Moses Malone, Dr. J team that beat my Los Angeles Lakers, by the way, because I'm a native Los Angelino. I still remember that series very, very, very vividly. So, by the way, the lessons you learned at that point in time, the consequences of betting, I suppose, and hard work and earning, I would imagine those have been formative throughout
For sure.
You reflect on those, I'm sure.
Yes.
So you're at college, you go to the Ohio State University, and you graduate from college, and then you said you worked summers with Uncle Alan, but do you go directly into campus apartments at that time and begin working there?
I did. It's funny because I graduated on a Thursday and I started work on that Monday.
Wow.
Never forget it. I was just like raring to go. I'm like, let's go.
You knew you wanted to do this. You knew you wanted to go into real estate, or was it just like, this is an opportunity and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't?
As crazy as it sounds, by the time I got to graduate in college, I couldn't think of anything else I wanted to do.
Wow,
the exception was I thought maybe I'd go to law school, and I just realized that was not going to be for me. I'm not the best student, to be honest with you. And I just said, like, I was ready to go. And so I remember all my friends were leaving for Europe the next day to go backpacking. And I came back to Philly and, Monday morning showed up at the office bright and early.
And so you start working there, and you said you've done a lot of jobs and all the things that you needed to do in the organization. When you started, what was the size of campus apartments? How many employees, property, geography?
Yeah, there were about, we figured back then there were about 40 employees, and that would include maintenance and kind of a light construction crew, because Alan would always do kind of the capital himself, with in-house. And we had it was a pretty large collection of buildings, call it at that time, I'll say maybe it was 1,200 to 1,500 units. So
okay.
It was a good sized business.
Yeah. He built a big portfolio at that point.
He did. And it was a very concentrated portfolio within within a mile. So it was kind of unique. So we started at that size. And then what really happened is I had a courtside seat watching how the University of Pennsylvania handled its real estate. And I watched and I said, it's very interesting. And the analogy that I kind of grew to become was, if you look at universities and you say, when you and I went to college, the person serving the sloppy Joe sandwich at lunch was probably a university employee back then, not some outsourced provider, and there's a handful from Aramark, Legends, Sodexo, Levy, there's a ton of those guys that are doing that. Somebody figured out at the university that is a better use of time and resources to not be in that business and bring in a professional. And what I noticed at Penn and then, subsequently at other schools, and, this is in the mid 90s, is that they are in the education business. They're in the real estate business as a byproduct of solving the primary objective, which is to educate students. But that doesn't mean that they're experts in that. They're experts in education. Sure. And so I looked at that and I said, well, you know what? Could I become the Aramark, Sodexo, Levy of university real estate? Could I go out there and provide these services for them and to get them off the hook? And I was very fortunate that there was a guy named John Fry at the time who was the kind of the chief business officer or COO of the university at that time. And he came from non-academia. He was a consultant. So I kind of pitched my idea and he's like, I totally agree with you. We shouldn't be in this business. We should outsource it to professionals. And so a couple things happened between the late 90s and early 2000s, which is, one, I took over the property management of Penn's off-campus real estate. It was about 800 or 1,000 apartments, because what they had done is strategically gone out into the neighborhoods and bought property surrounding the campus in case they wanted to expand. They didn't want noxious uses there. So they wanted to control their own destiny. And so it's a pretty sizable portfolio for a university. So we started managing their stuff in like 1999. And I'll never forget, it was kind of the first time my partner Alan and I kind of had a disagreement because he was like, we're owners. We manage our own stuff. We don't want somebody else's headache. And I saw it like, wow, we were like a mom and pop business, did things well, but like Excel or, it was a very analog way of tracking how we were doing. But it worked for us for a small business. But I thought if I could do something for Penn, I would be forced to do something in the institutional space, right? I'd be forced to learn how to like put those systems in place. What are their expectations for reporting, financials, all of that stuff. And so like for me, I wanted to jump into the fire and just learn what they were doing and what they needed. Because I thought down the road, if I could do it for Penn, I might be able to do it for an investor down the road. Because at that point, we'd only used our own capital.
Just for them to make that decision, because that was kind of
that was a big deal for them to make that.
First mover kind of decision for that. And,
yep.
and you guys, as your Uncle Alan said, you owned your own stuff and managed your own stuff. You didn't do third party management.
Right.
What prompted them to make the bet on you guys, to pick you guys? We'll be right back.
Meet, collaborate, and engage with the technology leaders driving transformational growth in our industry at ICSC Plus PropTech. This groundbreaking new event takes place during ICSC Las Vegas 2026, now Monday to Wednesday, May 18th to the 20th. Details at icsc.com.
Well, I think we're able to show, one, because we were already well vested in that neighborhood. We had skin in the game. We weren't just a fee manager. They had thought about going to a fee manager, but having the skin in the game. And then the scale of the two portfolios together, operating those, created some really great efficiencies and allowed both of us to up our game.
So you start with the Penn properties, property managing them, and then you go to Uncle Alan and you say, I want to go national. I want to go outside of Philadelphia. And what does he say?
Yeah. So what really happened is I started, so in the late 90s, so I came to the office full time in 1994. By like 97, 98, he saw that I had something in me that wanted to do more than just what he had done in his really great microcosm. And he just said, look, like, you're young, you have energy, you're smart. I like what we have here. I'm going to be your partner. I'm going to help you get going. He put up money for me to get me going, which was amazing. But the truth of the matter was, he's like, you should run this business. I don't want to get he said, like, I don't want to get on a plane.
You're 25, 26 years old.
25, 26 years old. I don't want to get on a plane. And he's like, yeah. I said, well, look, I do. I'm young. I've got energy. I'm going to do it. And he's like, well, then you should run the business. And so it was a wild thing to be, a CEO at 25, 26 years old. You have 40 plus employees at that time, all of them which are older than me.
Which is intimidating, even if you're highly confident and ambitious. That age difference is a big deal at that point. So Uncle Alan's placed a faith in you, and you're going to go grow the business. Where did you first go? Where was your first geography that you went to begin to build out what you got today?
We did a couple of things all around the same time. We went from Philadelphia to New Jersey. We went to North Carolina. There was an opportunity that came up through one of our lenders that brought us something. Then we went to Ohio. And so we kind of like, one step, then the next, then the next, then the next. And then what really put us on the map is I got approached in like 2005. There were already one or two student housing REITs at that time. And we were probably the biggest private player, one of the bigger private players at that time. And the banks came to me and said, you should go public, become a REIT. I knew I wanted to raise capital. I wasn't convinced that I was cut out to be a public company CEO.
How big were you at this point, David? What's the number of units?
So at that point, maybe we were 5,000 beds.
Okay.
At that point in time, 4,000 or 5,000 beds. But I knew I needed capital because back in those days, you would do a development deal. You could finance 110%, get your money back and roll the next deal, right? It was pretty easy. But we knew we could only do so much of that. And so instead of going public, I ran a process and wound up raising. So it was interesting. 9 banks pitched me, 8 wanted me to go public. And 1 said, we think you should do a private fund or a private round and then give yourself optionality. I got to give a shout out. There's a great guy at Deutsche Bank at the time. And I think, kind of in the early 2000s, they were one of the real leaders in real estate capital markets. A guy named Ron Blumenthal, who was, really senior in real estate investment banking. Him and a guy named Simon Leopold, who said, we think you should do a private round. And, I was far from institutional at that point. Like I was on my way. They saw the potential, but I was,
You're still a young guy at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe you're
so
like
I was
20.
young. I didn't have a huge track record, but I had motivation and confidence. I think, they were moved to kind of get behind me. And, everyone needs a break, and they were my break. And, them vouching for me after their diligence of us. We went out, and I remember saying to them, listen, whatever we do, we got to raise at least $300 million. And to be clear, Tom, I'd never raised $1 prior to that. Okay. This was my first capital raise. And I say to them, well, if I'm going to do this, I want $300 million. And they couldn't understand why. I said, I'll tell you when we're done. Okay. Long story short, we tour them around. We're taking investors, showing them the stuff we're doing. And that was, very early in the days of student housing. And I always tell the story that I started going to real estate conferences in like 2002, 3 and 4 national stuff, NAA, NMHC, all different stuff, but what have you. And literally like you'd have the multifamily guys, the hotel guys, the retail guys, and like they wouldn't let the student housing guys sit at their lunch table, right? I'm in bad real estate. It's, it's dirty. It's Animal House. And I remember thinking to myself, like, one of us is right and one of us is wrong. Like, I see this captive audience. I see mom and dad guaranteeing the rent. I see like universities that are growing and don't have enough housing. I was like, but like, maybe I'm missing it or maybe they're missing it. I don't know. And so I just leaned in, and I didn't care that no one else wanted to do it. And we go out on this road show, and sure enough, I raised $300 million from a global sovereign wealth fund. Okay. Their first student housing investment. But what was really important to me was,
that's pretty impressive. I mean,
I tell everyone, I say, look, $300 million in 2005 was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right.
Really, it's still a lot of money, but it was a lot of money back
then. And so I get the money, but then you realize, back in the day, you put $300 million down and then you put leverage on it. You've got $1 billion worth of assets. So I remember the press release was like $1 billion joint venture.
That's why you picked the $300 million.
I did, because I said, if I'm going to do something big in this space, I'm going to do it before anyone can catch me. And went out there, raised that capital, and then just started rolling up smaller operators. And at any given time, we've been up to 800-900 employees. And then you scale back, you sell, you do different things. I think we've been in as many 25 states. I think we're 18 or 19 states today. And really just doing 3 things: new construction development, renovations, and like rehab. But then really what we found where there was a lot of hidden alpha was on the property management side. We realized that people that were not from this business trying to get into this business didn't have the chops for it.
Mm-hmm.
Way more management intensive, right? Like, back then you were actually helping kids balance their checkbook to pay their rent. And so it was just a different time. We had the patience for it. Trust me when I say we made a ton of mistakes along the way. Okay. But it's the only way you learn. And we kind of just went from a premise of like, what's the right thing to do because you have somebody's kids living in your building, their most prized possession, right? And the most important thing in anyone's world. So it's like, let's start with that. Let's start with the compassion for the fact that this is generally a student's first time living away from home. You're now no longer in the dorms. You're kind of on your own. And like, how do we make that a really good experience? And that was kind of our North Star.
Let's delve into that a little bit deeper, because you made the point that when you were beginning this process and the other sectors of commercial real estate didn't want to sit at the table with you, and they're thinking this Animal House style kind of housing, but you had a vision, and your properties are anything but that. So they're very well put together, very high end. Talk about the vision of what a student living in a campus apartment property today would experience versus what people might think of when they think of student housing. What maybe you and I lived in when we were going back.
Yeah, look, I lived in the townhouse with, with like 2 bathrooms for 8 guys, right? Today it's bed bath parity. Everyone has their own bathroom. Everyone has, these are furnished.
So people have their own bathrooms, individual bathrooms.
Own bathroom. So our prototype is a 4-bedroom, 4-bath, and we furnished them. We thought that for 2 reasons. I thought early on that when you think of wear and tear in a building, moving furniture in and out beats the crap out of the building. And then I was also like, if we're doing development, what do you want to fit in this layout? And I was like, if we provide our own furniture, so we were getting, 4-bedroom, 4-bath units and, 1,600 square feet.
Wow.
So you can make it really efficient. And lastly, mom and dad just have to bring the kid, the laptop, and their luggage, right? And they're off to the races.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to make it really simple for them. The fitness centers, like if we send you pictures of the stuff we have in our fitness centers, that they equal like an urban gym. Some of our common areas, I joke, we did a property in Clemson and we put a slide in from the 2nd floor down to the 1st floor, looked like Google's offices. And so, it's not your grandfather's student housing.
I have 2 daughters, a number of years out of college. We live in New Jersey. One went to undergrad up in Boston. The other one went to undergrad in LA. And back when I was a kid, you kind of went to college generally in most kids in the geography in which they lived. They went away, but maybe it was an hour away, 2 hours away.
Yep.
Now, because of technology and visibility and football programs, kids go farther away to college. There's plenty of kids in the tri-state area that go down south to college now, to Georgia and Clemson and Florida. I would assume that that's been a positive for the student housing industry, for your business, because to your point, parents are moving their kids and they don't want to have to, supply furniture and so forth. And they also want to make sure they're living somewhere decent and safe and nice.
Yeah. What's really happened is, especially the school, schools in the Southeast, all over the place, is the popularity of the college football program or basketball program helped attract and turn those schools from a, in-state school to a students from out of state. Out of state students also pay more than in-state students. And so you saw that schools realized that recruiting out of state students was valuable and important. And so what that meant to us as, owner operators is those kids had more disposable income than the value students paying in-state tuition. And so that we could afford to build these kind of higher end luxury student housing properties.
We'll be right back. Help us reach more listeners by rating us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform. Looking ahead 10, 15 years, there continued growth in this whole area, continued professionalization of it, outsourcing of property management. It makes perfect sense. I thought your analogy between student housing and food service is a pretty good one. That makes sense. It's outside of their core competency.
The way I see it is, even in an environment, if you get to one where enrollments flatten or decline based on population curve, you still have aging infrastructure. And you still need to update properties, renovate them, redo them. And so I think, what I feel fortunate about for us and what our investors feel fortunate about when they come into one of our funds is we don't just do one thing. A lot of my peers only do development, and that's great. They do a very nice job, and, we're all, friendly competitors. I think what makes us unique is because of the way I grew up in Penn with urban scattered site real estate. I started with the hardest thing in real estate, which is managing scattered site assets, renovating old properties from the early 1900s and going from there. So you give me a clean site and I get to build, that's easy. But, give me a first generation, 1995 student housing property. I'm the perfect guy to redevelop it into something new and exciting.
You mentioned something about parents guaranteeing the rent, which makes it a pretty attractive business. What kind of impact did COVID have on? That's an interesting time period for student housing and higher education in general.
So, Tom, the interesting thing is, prior to COVID, when I raised my first fund in 2012, after I did the 300 million, I then went to a private equity fund model instead of having one investor. People were like, hey, online learning, that's going to, negate the need for student housing. I was kind of like, you're not going to replace the education of oneself that happens in that environment. Being in school, living on your own, the responsibility of having to do your laundry, change your sheets, make your, like all those things that kids need to learn isn't going to happen living at home with mom and dad. So fast forward to COVID and you had, schools starting to shut down and go to online. What happened was you saw some kids go home. Mom and dad who are working are trying to do their Zooms from home. The kids are trying to Zoom. They're getting on each other's nerves. And sure enough, the kids wind up going back to their apartment that mom and dad are paying for, being with their friends and doing school from there. And, so we collected 98% of our revenue during COVID.
Wow. That's staggering.
They're different from your colleagues in the retail business.
Outside of the random issue here or there, you're probably close to 100% in general. So basically there was almost no erosion in your business. It's crazy.
Correct.
I totally agree with you. University and people going away to school, it's really about maturation as a person too, right? Those years are so important.
Yeah.
And advance of technology, which I'm sure is impacting education. I just don't think it's going to impact the desire and the need and really the importance of kids moving away and living on their own at that phase of their life. So you've built this impressive business, Campus Apartments, but you're also an entrepreneur and you do a lot of other things as well. You've set up a large family office, Darko Capital. Talk about your vision for that, your interests. What do you invest in? And why'd you start it to begin with?
Yeah, I think the main reason I started it was I love learning about other businesses and I love meeting other entrepreneurs. And so that really, my first foray outside real estate was in 2006, 2007. I started a business in the financial services space called Future Standard. And the goal was to bring alternative investments to the retail masses. And that's really turned out to be a wonderful business that we now manage about $86 billion of, individual money, a little bit of institutional. Wow. And so that's been a great business. And,
how do you get your clients on Future Standard? Are you working with?
So for example, you want to go to UBS, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch now, a handful of others. Our products are on their platform, our funds. And so we thought we were solving a problem there, which was to make, alternatives available to the masses. I then created Darko Capital because I was like, I really like investing in other things. I don't need to be the control investor. I can share knowledge and experience. And, I always say the benefit of bringing me into your deals, you get all the mistakes I've made, so you don't have to make those. And I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I like starting up businesses, but this is the best of all worlds. It allows me to stay in my seat at Campus Apartments, but still back other businesses and scratch that itch a little bit. And we're in everything from fintechs to climate tech to a lot of consumer products to all different things. And then obviously, we'll talk about the sports business and things like that. And so, it's been able to provide me kind of a platform to get involved in lots of different things, meet lots of great people. And, to the extent that I could be an advisor and share knowledge with folks, I'm enjoying it.
How many investments in the Darko portfolio today?
About 85.
That's crazy. Yeah, so you're taking minority interests in a variety of different companies, generally non-controlling interests. But
correct.
Wow, that's impressive. The concept is so different from real estate. What prompted you to say, I'm going to go do this? I'm going to co-found this because it's just so different than what you were doing at Campus Apartments.
I saw a mismatch in the market. And so, for example, if you're, a high net worth, wealthy individual, I get access to hedge funds, private equity funds, venture capital funds, because I'm an accredited investor, right?
Right.
And my father, who's a retired psychologist, did fine in life, did well, but not wealthy. He got 60-40 stocks and bonds, right? That was what every financial advisor told you. And I just thought something was wrong there. And I said, let's create a way for the masses to get access to something more than just stocks and bonds. So, private credit, real estate, all these other things that we were able to create. And so, knock on wood, it's like a little bit of luck and hard work. It's kind of worked out.
Just speaks to your entrepreneurial mindset because I get the connection and the lessons you've learned and the observations you made from your father in not having access to those things. But taking the step, founding a business like that is unique and it speaks to an ambition that a lot of people wouldn't have.
I think it's ambition, but candidly, Tom, I'm not afraid to fail.
Yeah.
And it's, and I mentor lots of people. I teach a lot and people don't understand that. So when you don't have the pressure of failure and you're loose generally a lot of good things happen.
It was that non-fear of losing that prompted you to lose that basketball game, which was some pretty good things in life, right? So
no doubt.
maybe that's subliminally behind your motivation. All right. So you are entrepreneurial, you have a visionary mindset. How did you get involved in sports? Walk me through the journey where you're now invest in Harris Blitzer Sports.
Yeah, so really fortunate. So I have two great partners in Josh Harris and David Blitzer, who are just awesome guys. The Sixers were for sale, my hometown team, in 2012, 2013. I had another friend of mine, Michael Rubin, who's a Philly guy. We were like, we should buy it. And there were kind of like two main issues. One, two small details. We were busy building our respective businesses. And two, we didn't have enough money. Yeah, the small detail of that. Now, should we have focused on it and raised the money? Probably. Michael wound up going into the deal with those guys in a minority position. I passed, fast forward, what I paid to buy Michael out, I could have bought the team. But, life just throws you a curveball. And then what happened was a couple years later, Josh and David bought Crystal Palace, a Premier League soccer team. And I went in on that with them. And then as time went on, my friend Michael, who created Fanatics, a brilliant company, is one of the best entrepreneurs I've ever met.
Close friend of yours, right?
One of my closest friends for 25 years. He started adding sports betting at the Fanatics. And the NBA and NHL, because we own the Sixers and the New Jersey Devils, the NBA and NHL said you can't own a sports book and own teams. I tell people it was, one of the quickest negotiations of one of the larger deals I've done. We negotiated the price in 3 minutes. And that was that. And that's been great. Michael was happy for me to have it as a Philly guy and local guy. And, the dream of, there was always stakes in sports teams available, but to be able to kind of own a piece of your own hometown team is pretty special.
Yeah.
And so that's been the exciting part.
Particularly in a community like Philadelphia, where just such a passion and loyalty to the local teams. Although, how did you reconcile the New Jersey Devils ownership and just being a Philadelphia guy? You had to feel a little bit of a second thought about leaving the Flyers. So
yeah, it's funny. Like my friends growing up were like, "You're not really going to wear that hat and that shirt." And I have to be honest with you, like the first few times I went to games, putting it on, it felt weird. I'm all in now. Love the team. Love the energy. I feel very connected to it. I think the Devils have amazing fans. But yet, look, I'm a rabid Sixers fan, and all the other Philly sports teams are for me. And look, the only time I root against the Flyers is when they're playing the Devils.
Got it. Okay,
right?
Fair enough. So, sports ownership and sports franchises is heavily in the news. There was the Buss family selling their majority interest in the Lakers and the valuation. When you made that decision, you said it was a quick conversation. Of course, you guys trusted each other and had a relationship. But as you evaluate ownership in sports, in a sports franchise, it's got to be a different kind of calculation than it is in a real estate deal or other businesses, isn't it? Or do you approach it the same way?
It's interesting. I think the only analogy you could give someone is for people who invest in a restaurant or something like of a smaller scale, right? Like you're like, this will be fun. It's a local place. I'm going to, entertainment. Hopefully it does well and all of that. But like for me, I always believed that sports was a good business. Okay. I knew that this is, it reminds me, I'll tell you how it reminds me of real estate. When everyone looks at real estate, from an IRR basis versus a cash on cash basis, sports is an IRR business, right? I'm putting the money in. You're not really focused on distributions. Those are rare if you're investing them back in the team and in talent. And, someday I don't plan on selling it while I'm still here, but, when my kids or wife decide if I'm not here and they sell it, and hopefully it turned out to be a good IRR.
The analogy in real estate, it's a long-term investment business. You're betting on the valuation 20, 30 years from now, potentially being much greater than.
And look, you got to put a price and a value on fun.
Yeah.
And, I'm fortunate that I'm at a stage of my life where I am, I work really hard. I'm not, I'm still, I say, I'm still in the middle innings of my career, but having some fun is important too.
Yeah. All right. Well, talking about having fun. So the new 76er Arena, you're chairing that development process. Talk about the vision there. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about stadiums and arenas in general. There's been a lot of advancements in that over the course of the last decade or so.
Yeah. So exciting. I'm going to build a new arena in Philadelphia. And here's the unique part. It's for the Sixers and the Flyers, right? So it's going to be a 50-50 joint venture. I'm leading the effort. And I've spent the last 3 years traveling the world looking at every sports venue I could find or music venue. And, it's exciting for me because for the real estate I've developed in my career, very rarely is there ego driven in those things. It's more like, what's the supply? What's the demand? What problem am I trying to solve? Here, I've built a really impressive team to work on this. I wake up every day saying that we are going to build the best live entertainment venue in the world in Philadelphia. And that's our North Star. And so I think about that every day, and I am in the details of the plans, like, path of travel for the fans, where the bathrooms are located, how long until you get a drink or a snack, like all of these things, for the players, what's their program going to be? And Philly's a very unique sports town because all of our sports properties are in one parking lot.
They're all next to each other.
Right?
Yeah, it's a wonderful experience from a fan
Very
perspective.
unique.
It's wonderful.
But when you think about what Philly fans experience for a game, their tailgating experience is driving to a parking lot and opening the trunk of your car, pulling a chair out and sitting down and having a drink and something to eat. That's the pregame experience. So I'm about to introduce something that is going to change the pregame experience in Philadelphia. We're going to have retail in front of the arena, public plaza, really just a great activation site for on games, on concerts, and even on the off days as well. And so I feel fortunate to be able to do like a once in a generation project, in my own hometown that will be remembered by lots of people who are going to enjoy it.
Well, it's a labor of love for you as a lifelong Philadelphia.
Tom, it's a lot of work. Like I will tell you, it is not easy. Like it's definitely more work than I expected it to be.
Before we leave that topic real quick, you mentioned the experiential element to it. So there's going to be a lot of retail and entertainment options. View it as a destination that people would go to even when they're not attending the game. So it'll be a destination people could utilize from a dining out and a shopping experience when they're not at the game, or do you feel it's really there as an amenity for those that are attending a game or a concert?
I think a couple things. I think that hopefully this will service the other fans going, baseball has 80 home games a year. The NFL's there, so the goal is, could I create a great experience so that when someone is going out to a sporting event, be it ours or theirs, that they can have a great pre and post game experience. And so I know that our building is going to house over 225, 230 nights a year. Okay. That's just us. And then you have 80 games of baseball, you have concerts and other things for the Eagle Stadium. And so for us to be able to create a place that brings people together and then can be a community asset. So, can this courtyard I'm building and everything else be great for farmers markets and things like that on the weekends for the community? So these are the things we're thinking about.
Well, Philadelphia is unique and all the sports arenas and stadiums are right next to each other. So it is an opportunity for folks to utilize it, even if they're not using the arena. So finally, you're a lifelong Philadelphian, very active in the community. You've been active in a lot of causes. Talk about some of the things you've been active in and why they're so important to you, David, because I know that you've leaned in heavily in a number of different ways.
Yeah, look, I think when you are fortunate and you've had some success, how can you and your family share that benefit with others? My wife was a teacher, then she got her PhD. Now she's a children's book author. She makes cause-based documentaries. So she has her way of giving back when it comes to education. I'm on the board of Penn Medicine. So, medical things are important to me, community-based organizations, Jewish philanthropy. I built the Holocaust Memorial here in Philadelphia. That was a passion of, importance to me based on my family history. And so for me, I just want to help and solve problems to the best we can. I want to try and motivate people to give and help people. And that's how I live my life.
Well, David, you live a great life. You're doing great things. What a broad portfolio of things that you're involved in. I mean, everything from real estate to basically private equity and alternative investments and investing in your community in Philadelphia, which you love. So it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
I appreciate it, Tom. Thank you.
There's a whole bunch. We could have talked about sports and all that kind of stuff too, a lot more, because I know we're both fanatical about that, but
absolutely,
we kept it mostly to business. So.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, David.
Take care.
Please follow and rate this podcast 5 stars on Apple and Spotify and share it with others that might find it interesting. Thanks for listening. Help us reach more listeners by rating us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform.